In the 41st millennium, there is only war, but war takes many forms. Some battles are fought with bolter and blade across scorched battlefields. Others are waged in shadow, against enemies that wear human flesh and whisper promises from the Imperium. The Imperium had 10,000 years to perfect its hatred of the supernatural, to forge weapons from faith and fire against the demon. But what happens when something from another reality arrives? Something that hunts monsters not with prayer, but with preparation? The Emperor's servants were about to discover that expertise comes in unexpected forms. The rift opened without warning in the underhive of Varangia Prime, deep beneath the manufacturing districts where the Emperor's light barely penetrated. No Geller field flickered, no warp signature bloomed on the inquisitorial Auspex arrays. Reality simply tore. For 3 seconds, the barrier between dimensions screamed, and through that wound in existence fell a man who should not exist. Geralt of Rivia hit the ferrocrete hard enough to crack it. His cat-like eyes snapped open, pupils dilating in the chemical-laced darkness. The stench hit him first. Promethium, human waste, burning ozone, and something else. Something wrong. Not the sulphurous reek of a fiend, nor the corpse stink of a ghoul. This was corruption of a different order entirely, a psychic rot that made his Witcher medallion vibrate against his chest, despite the absence of any visible threat. He rose slowly, silver sword already in hand, instinct overriding confusion. The underhive stretched before him in impossible architecture, bridges of rusted metal spanning chasms that descended into absolute darkness, factories churning with automated rhythms, fungi growths the size of houses glowing with bioluminescent blues and greens. Servitors shuffled past, half-human things with mechanical augmentations that made Geralt's jaw tighten. Whatever world the wild hunt had thrown him into, it was no place for the living. His signs flickered when he tried them. Igni sputtered, flames weak and reluctant. Quen formed a shield, but it shimmered with instability. The ambient energy here was alive, hostile, screaming with voices he couldn't quite hear. Geralt had fought in the presence of powerful magic before, the conjunction of spheres, the wild hunt's dimensional storms, but this was different. This felt like drowning in a sea of malevolent consciousness. Lost, off-worlder? The voice came from shadows between corroded support pillars. A figure emerged, human or mostly human. Her left arm was entirely mechanical, ending in a viciously curved blade. Scars covered half her face, and her remaining eye held the hard glint of someone who'd survived in places where survival shouldn't be possible. You've got that look, the one that says you don't know where in the God Emperor's domain you've landed. Geralt's grip on his sword didn't waver. Where am I? Varangia Prime, Underhive. Specifically, you're in the Rust Quarter, which means you've got about 10 minutes before the Sump Crows notice fresh meat. She tilted her head, studying his leather armor, the twin swords on his back, the white hair. Though you don't look like standard prey. Mercenary? Rogue trader's muscle? Monster hunter. The words felt inadequate here, but they were all he had. The woman's laugh was bitter. Monsters? Friend, you're standing in a hive city of 8 billion souls. Monsters are the least of your worries. Unless... Her expression shifted, sharpened. What kind of monsters? Before Geralt could answer, his medallion began to vibrate violently. Not the gentle hum of nearby magic. This was a shriek of alarm. He spun, Witcher senses tracking movement in the darkness above. Something was crawling across the ceiling, something that bent reality around it like heat shimmer. His cat eyes could make out a vaguely humanoid shape, but it flickered, phasing in and out of visibility. Where it touched the metal, corrosion spread instantly. "Warp spawn," the woman hissed, backing away. "Holy throne, that's a... Run! Run!" Geralt didn't run. He'd spent a lifetime moving toward danger, not away from it. The creature dropped from the ceiling with impossible grace, and Geralt finally saw it clearly. Flesh that writhed with faces trying to push through from inside, limbs that ended in crystalline claws, eyes that were windows into somewhere lightless and vast. Not a monster. Something worse. His silver sword met its first warp-spawned demon with a shriek of metaphysical agony. The blade burned with sudden heat, silver's natural antipathy to chaos manifesting in ways Geralt had never experienced with wraiths or spectres. The demon felt it, recoiling as smoke rose from the wound. Its scream was layered, dozens of voices crying out in languages that hurt to hear. Geralt pressed the attack, muscle memory guiding him through forms perfected over decades. The creature was fast, inhumanly so, but Witcher reflexes were faster. He flowed around a claw strike that would have disemboweled him, brought his blade up in a diagonal slash that opened the demon from hip to shoulder. The wound didn't bleed blood. It bled light, sickly purple radiance that hissed against the ferrocrete. Yrden. He needed to trap it. Geralt's fingers traced the sign, but the energy twisted in his grip. Instead of a clean circle of purple light, the trap sputtered and cracked, barely containing the demon for 3 seconds. Long enough. His silver blade found the creature's approximation of a heart, drove through, twisted. The demon exploded into ash and screaming psychic feedback. Geralt staggered, head ringing. For a moment, he'd felt something trying to crawl in all his mind, whispers promising power, knowledge, an end to his eternal solitude. His Witcher mutations had rejected it like poison, but the touch remained, oily and intrusive. By the golden throne, the woman was staring at him with something between awe and terror. You just... with a sword? No sanctified weapons, no prayers, no... Who in the warp are you? Geralt sheathed his blade, breathing heavily. I told you, monster hunter. He met her eye. And I'm going to need answers, starting with what that thing was and why it felt like a demon, but moved like a wraith. The woman glanced at the ash pile, then back to Geralt. That's what the priests call a lesser demon of Tzeentch. And if you killed one without being trained by the Inquisition... She swallowed hard. We need to move. Now. Because if I saw that, so did the Auspex arrays. And when the Inquisition comes for you, friend, you'd better hope they decide you're useful before they decide you're heretical. Geralt felt the weight of a new world settling on his shoulders. No continent, no familiar monsters, just endless war in a universe that made the conjunction of spheres look merciful. He'd hunted creatures from fairy tales and nightmares alike. Now, it seemed, he'd hunt demons born from the souls of mortals, in a place where hope itself was heresy. He thought of Ciri, of Yennefer, of a world he might never see again. Then he pushed the thought aside. A Witcher adapted, a Witcher survived, and if this new world needed monsters hunted, then by the gods, whatever gods held power here, he would hunt them. "Lead the way," he told the woman, "and tell me everything you know about these Daemons." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "Everything? That'd take 10 lifetimes. But I'll tell you enough to keep you breathing until the Inquisition decides your fate." She started walking, and Geralt followed into the darkness of Varangia Prime's endless depths, silver sword ready, medallion still trembling against his chest. The hunt had begun. If you crave stories of cosmic collisions and impossible heroes navigating the grimdark Millennium, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to hunters in the dark. The woman's name was Kael, and she'd survived 12 years in the Underhive by knowing when to fight and when to vanish. She led Geralt through a maze of maintenance tunnels that reeked of industrial waste and human desperation, past shanty settlements where hollow-eyed children watched them with the wariness of rats. Geralt's Witcher senses catalogued everything. The constant thrumming of machinery that never stopped, the chemical taste in the recycled air, the way everyone they passed bore scars or augmentations or both. "The Inquisition doesn't come down here often," Kael explained, her mechanical arm scraping against the tunnel wall as they descended. "But they monitor the warp. What you killed, that registered. They'll send someone. Question is whether it's an interrogator looking for answers or an execution squad looking for heretics," Geralt grunted. "I've dealt with witch hunters before." "Not like these." Kael's laugh was humorless. "The Inquisition doesn't ask questions first. They burn whole hive levels on suspicion alone. 8 billion people on Varangia Prime, and they'd exterminate every one of us if they thought chaos had taken root." She glanced back at him. "That sword of yours? Silver? Silver for monsters, steel for men. Practical. Won't save you if they decide you're tainted." She paused at a junction, listening. Distant sounds echoed. Last fire, screaming, the grinding of tracked vehicles. "Arbeits patrol. We'll need to—" The tunnel exploded inward. Not metaphorically. The ferrocrete wall simply ceased to exist, replaced by a gaping hole and 3 figures in power armor that made Geralt's breath catch. They were massive, easily 7 feet tall, encased in black ceramite plate inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at. Red eye lenses fixed on him with targeting precision. Each carried a weapon that resembled a crossbow mated with a cannon, ornate and brutal in equal measure. "Contact identified," one intoned, voice rendered inhuman by voxcasters. "Unregistered psycho manifestation, Sector 7 Beta. Target, male, unknown origin, silver-class demon banishment detected." The bolt pistol rose. "Compliance or termination. Choose now." Geralt's hand didn't move toward his sword. He'd fought enough battles to recognize when steel wouldn't solve the problem. "I'm no psyker. I killed something that needed killing. If that's a crime here, then your laws need work." "Heresy," the second figure stated flatly. "Unauthorized demon engagement without ecclesiarchy sanction. Possession risk severe. Interrogation required." The armored giant stepped forward, and Geralt saw the symbol on his pauldron, a stylized eye bisected by 3 bars, surrounded by a skull. "You will accompany us to Inquisitor Harkon immediately. Resistance will be met with Emperor-sanctioned force." Kael had already melted into the shadows. Smart. Geralt stood alone, weighing options. 3 armored soldiers with weapons that could probably punch through castle walls in a world he didn't understand, hunting creatures he was only beginning to comprehend. Running would solve nothing. Fighting would end with him dead or worse. "I'll come," he said carefully, "but I want answers. What I killed, you call it a demon. I need to know what I'm hunting." The lead figure's head tilted slightly. "Hunting?" For the first time, something like curiosity entered the mechanical voice. "You claim to hunt demons? Without training? Without faith?" A pause. "Inquisitor Harkon will find this interesting move. Any deviation from our path results in summary execution." They marched him through the underhive with mechanical precision, and Geralt used every second to observe. The power armor was incredible, sealed, environmentally controlled, likely proof against most conventional weapons. The bolt pistols fired self-propelled explosive ammunition. He could tell from the distinctive magazines and the scorch marks on their weapons' barrels. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were something else entirely. The underhive gave way to the midhive, and Geralt's first glimpse of true Imperial architecture stole his breath. Everything was massive, built for intimidation rather than comfort. Cathedrals that could swallow entire cities rose in the distance, their spires disappearing into smog layers thousands of feet above. Statues of armored figures, saints or generals, he couldn't tell, loomed over processional roads where millions shuffled in regimented columns. This wasn't a civilization. It was a machine that processed human beings as fuel. They entered a fortress monastery that made Kaer Morhen look like a peasant's cottage. Black stone inscribed with wards that made Geralt's medallion vibrate, gun servitors tracking them with automated precision. And everywhere, the smell of incense trying unsuccessfully to mask the scent of fear and old blood. His escorts led him deep into the structure's heart, through corridors lined with skulls and purity seals, until they reached a chamber that radiated menace. Inquisitor Harkon stood with his back to them, studying a flickering hololithic display that showed the underhive in 3 dimensions. Red markers pulsed at dozens of locations. When he turned, Geralt saw a man who'd clearly sacrificed pieces of himself for his cause. One eye replaced with a bionic that whirred and clicked, half his face reconstructed with metal, one hand ending in something between a claw and a data spike. The remaining human eye burned with absolute conviction. So, Hakan's voice was cultured, almost pleasant. The anomaly has a face. Genetic markers indicate significant augmentation. Not imperial, not Xenos. Curious. He circled Geralt like a wolf examining wounded prey. My stormtroopers report you dispatched a Tzinkian horror with a primitive blade and no psychic manifestation beyond... What did you call them? Signs? He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Tell me everything, starting with how you arrived on Varangia Prime and ending with why I shouldn't declare you an unsanctioned psyker and purge you where you stand. Geralt met his gaze steadily. I'm a witcher. Where I come from, monsters are real, and someone has to hunt them. I was fighting something called the Wild Hunt, interdimensional raiders, when reality broke and dropped me here. I don't know your warp or your demons, but I know monsters. I've spent my life learning their weaknesses, preparing the right weapons, using the right techniques. He paused. That thing in the underhive, it was a monster, so I killed it. Witcher. Hakan tasted the word. Not in any Imperial record, not in any Xenos database I've accessed. His bionic eye clicked through spectrums, analyzing. Yet your augmentations are undeniable. Enhanced metabolism, modified musculature, unnatural eye structure. He leaned closer. And you claim this is normal for your kind? That you hunt supernatural entities as profession? Contract work, usually. Villages hire me to kill the things that prey on them. Wraiths, vampires, werewolves, demons when they slip through. I prepare, I research, I fight. Geralt's voice remained flat. Same principle should apply to your demons, if I can learn their patterns. Hakan was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Emperor's mercy, you actually believe that? You think demons are simply another monster to study and kill? He turned back to the hololithic display. Tell me, Witcher, do your monsters feed on faith? Do they literally embody concepts like rage, despair, excess? Do they reshape reality by their mere presence? Some did, Geralt admitted. The ones born from emotions, from beliefs. We called it the conjunction of spheres, a cataclysm that merged worlds and brought magic. I've fought creatures that fed on fear, that grew stronger from human suffering. The Inquisitor's expression shifted, not quite respect, but acknowledgement. Perhaps you're not entirely ignorant. He gestured, and the hololithic display zoomed into the underhive. Red markers clustered around specific locations. Varangia Prime has a problem. Chaos cults, growing bolder. Lesser demon manifestations increasing by 17% monthly. My Ordo Malleus forces are stretched thin across 3 sectors. I have the authority to conscript specialists. His bionic eye fixed on Geralt. You killed a demon alone, without training, without faith. That makes you either incredibly fortunate or genuinely skilled. I intend to discover which. And if I refuse? Then I execute you as an unsanctioned psyker and potential chaos vector. Your augmentations are examined, your corpse is studied, and I lose a potential asset. Harkon smiled coldly. But you won't refuse, because I saw your face when you entered the mid-hive. You're lost in a universe you don't understand, surrounded by threats you can't identify. I offer you purpose. Hunt demons under my authority. Learn what you're truly facing, and perhaps, earn the right to exist in the Imperium. Geralt had negotiated with nobles, mages, and monsters alike. He recognized a trap when he saw one. But he also recognized opportunity. What are the terms? You accompany my retinue on demon hunting operations. Your combat effectiveness is assessed. If you prove useful, we discuss longer-term arrangements. If you prove a liability, or worse, corrupted, I personally deliver the Emperor's justice. Harkon's remaining organic eye glittered. You'll be monitored constantly. Any sign of possession, any indication of chaos taint, and my stormtroopers put a bolt round through your skull. Clear? Clear enough? Geralt's jaw tightened. But I work my way. I study the prey first. I prepare. Rushing into fights gets people killed. An attitude I can respect. Harkon gestured to his stormtroopers. Sergeant Varrak, assign quarters. Basic provisions, supervised access to the Librarium archives, demon-related texts only. He needs to understand what he's facing. The Inquisitor's gaze returned to Geralt. Your first operation begins in 18 hours. We've tracked a demon incursion to the processing district. Nurgle cultists attempting to summon a plague bearer. Consider it your examination. Pass, and we continue this arrangement. Fail, and your body joins the corpse starch recyclers. Geralt nodded slowly. He'd been tested before, by Vesemir, by contracts gone wrong, by the Lodge of Sorceresses. This was just another trial, albeit in a universe that made his own world's darkness look like twilight. One question, he said as the stormtroopers moved to escort him. Silver works against your demons. Why? Harkon actually smiled with something approaching genuine interest. Because silver is pure, Witcher. Incorruptible. In a universe where chaos constantly seeks to twist and taint, purity is anathema. Your instincts serve you well, though I doubt your silver will be enough against what you'll face. He turned back to his displays. 18 hours. Use them wisely. Study, prepare, pray if you're capable of it. You'll need every advantage. As they led him from the chamber, Geralt's mind was already working. Demons born from emotion and belief. Reality-warping entities that defied conventional understanding. A universe where faith was literal power and corruption lurked in every shadow. He'd adapted to new monsters before. He'd learned their patterns, exploited their weaknesses, survived when others fell. The 41st millennium would be no different. His medallion hummed softly against his chest, responding to the omnipresent taint of the warp. Somewhere in this fortress, he'd find texts, diagrams, records of demon weaknesses. He'd study, he'd prepare, and in 18 hours, he'd show Inquisitor Harkon exactly what a Witcher could do. The hunt continued. The librarium was a cathedral to paranoia. Tomes bound in human leather, data slates encrypted with 17 layers of security, and everywhere the smell of parchment and sanctified oils. Geralt spent 16 of his allotted 18 hours reading, cross-referencing, building a mental bestiary of horrors that made even contract monsters seem quaint. A robed archivist, more servitor than human, with 3 mechanical arms for handling forbidden texts, watched him constantly, ready to sound alarms if he showed signs of corruption. The demons of chaos came in 4 primary varieties, each aligned to a specific god in the warp. Khorne, blood and rage, demons of pure violence that fed on slaughter. Nurgle, decay and despair, plague bearers that spread entropy itself. Tzeentch, change and ambition, horrors that bent fate and reality. Slaanesh, excess and sensation, fiends that promised pleasure and delivered damnation. Each had distinct weaknesses, conceptual rather than physical. Faith could banish them, purity could wound them, symbols and wards could trap them. But what caught Geralt's attention was the small notation in a text titled Malleus Demonicus. Physical weapons blessed by faith retain efficacy against warp spawn. Silver demonstrates inherent anti-chaos properties of uncertain origin. Recommend consecration protocols for all demon hunting equipment. Silver worked because it was pure. His Witcher blades, forged without faith but with perfect craftsmanship, carried that same quality. No wonder his sword had burned the Tzeentchian horror. The question was whether silver alone would be enough, or if he needed this consecration the Imperium valued so highly. Geralt looked up from the tome as Sergeant Varrock entered, his stormtrooper armor somehow making even the cavernous librarium feel smaller. Time to move, Witcher. The Inquisitor wants you equipped before deployment. The armory was everything Geralt expected from a culture obsessed with war. Rows of weapons that could level buildings, armor that could withstand artillery, and in the center of it all, a tech priest who looked more machine than man. His remaining organic face was pale, bloodless, dominated by a cluster of optical sensors that clicked and whirred as they studied Geralt. Fascinating specimen, the tech priest intoned in binary-laced Gothic. Augmentations are organic rather than mechanical, inefficient but effective within parameters. The Inquisitor has authorized combat equipment provisioning. Mechanical tendrils extended from his back, each holding a different piece of gear. Standard issue, flak armor, vox bead for communication, combat knife sanctified against warp taint, 3 frag grenades, 2 crack grenades for armor penetration. Geralt examined the flak armor, composite plates over a body glove designed to stop shrapnel and small arms fire. Heavy, restrictive. I work better with mobility. The armor will slow me down. It will also prevent a cultist's auto-pistol from perforating your internal organs, Varrock said flatly. Wear the armor. A compromise was reached. Lighter armor plates over his Witcher leathers, enough protection for vital organs without sacrificing his enhanced reflexes. The vox bead nestled uncomfortably in his ear, crackling with encrypted chatter from other inquisitorial units across the hive. The grenades went into belt pouches, their weight familiar enough, not unlike the alchemical bombs he'd once crafted. Your silver blade, the tech priest said, mechanical arms reaching for Geralt's sword. It requires consecration protocols, blessed oils, prayers to the machine god and the emperor, sanctification litanies. No. Geralt's hand closed on the hilt. The sword stays as it is. Varrac's bolt pistol rose fractionally. You refuse the emperor's blessing? I refuse to let someone I don't know tamper with a weapon I've carried for decades. Silver works against demons already. I saw it. Geralt met the stormtrooper's eye lenses. You want me effective? Let me work with tools I understand. A tense silence stretched. Then Varrac's vox crackled. Harkon's voice, distant but clear. Let him keep his primitive weapon, Sergeant. If it fails against true warp spawn, the Witcher will learn an educational lesson shortly before his death. The tech priest withdrew his tendrils with what might have been disappointment. As the Inquisitor commands, though you reject the Omnissiah's blessing at your peril, off-worlder. 20 minutes later, Geralt found himself in a Rhino APC, cramped in with Varrac's stormtrooper squad and 3 additional figures who radiated a different kind of menace. They wore crimson robes over light armor, carried force weapons that hummed with psychic energy, and bore the same inquisitorial seal as Harkon. Acolytes, Varrac explained. Psychers trained to fight chaos with controlled warp manipulation. The one closest to Geralt, a woman with ritual scarification covering her shaved scalp, studied him with eyes that saw too much. You're not blank, she murmured, but you're muffled, like you're wrapped in something that dampens psychic resonance. Her head tilted. What are you? Geralt. He didn't elaborate. I am Interrogator Selene. The Inquisitor has instructed me to monitor you for signs of possession or corruption. Her scarred lips curved slightly. Try not to take it personally. Everyone is a potential vector for chaos, even saints. The Rhino's engine roared, and they plunged into Varangia Prime's processing district. Through vision slits, Geralt watched the architecture change. Factories the size of mountains, conveyor systems moving raw materials and finished products in endless loops. Worker habs stacked like children's blocks to dizzying heights. The people here looked worse than in the Underhive, hollowed out by labor, augmented with crude implants, their eyes empty of everything except the mechanical routine of survival. Target location, Varrac announced as the Rhino slowed. Corpse Starch Processing Plant 774. Workers reported seeing angels 2 days ago. Yesterday, production fell to 30%. This morning, the entire third shift failed to report. His bolt pistol locked and loaded with a mechanical snap. Probable demon manifestation supported by Nurgle cult. Extreme caution advised. They deployed into chemical fog that made even Geralt's enhanced lungs burn. The processing plant loomed like a steel cathedral, its entrance yawning wide and dark. The stench was immediate, not just industrial chemicals, but rot. Deep, organic decay that spoke of flesh corrupted and hope abandoned. Geralt's medallion vibrated so hard it bruised his chest. Contact, Selena whispered, her force staff beginning to glow. The warp is thick here. Something's pulled reality thin, made it permeable. We're walking into a wound in the Imperium. They advanced in tactical formation, stormtroopers taking point, acolytes in the middle, Geralt slightly to the side where he could observe and react. The factory interior was wrong. Machinery that should have been clean steel now wept with organic growths. The walls pulsed like living tissue. Conveyor belts carried not corpse starch but bodies. Workers transformed into bloated, fungal-covered monstrosities that still twitched with horrible life. "Emperor's mercy," one of the stormtroopers breathed. "Mercy is what they want," Varrak corrected coldly. "Don't give it to them. Purge the tainted, sanctify the corrupted, for the Emperor and the Inquisition." The attack came from everywhere at once. Cultists poured from side passages, humans twisted by Nurgle's blessing, their flesh sloughing off in chunks, pustules bursting with toxic gases. They moved with terrible purpose, chanting in a language that made Geralt's ears bleed. Behind them came the demons, plague-bearers, exactly as the texts described. Rotting green flesh, single horns erupting from foreheads, rusted plague swords that wept infection. The stormtroopers opened fire. Hellgun beams carved through cultists. Explosive bolt rounds detonated inside demonic flesh. But for every cultist that fell, 2 more appeared. For every plague-bearer wounded, its toxic blood ate through the ferrocrete floor like acid. Geralt moved. His silver sword sang as it cleared the scabbard, catching a plague-bearer's descending blade. The demon shrieked, that same multi-layered scream he'd heard in the Underhive, but deeper, wetted with disease. Geralt flowed around its guard, his Witcher training adapted on instinct. These creatures were slow, ponderous, relying on their corruption to overcome enemies. Speed as the answer. He severed the plague-bearer's sword arm. Black ichor sprayed, and where it touched his armor it began to corrode. Geralt ignored it, drove his blade through the demon's eye and into whatever passed for its brain. The creature burst into flies and foul mist, banished back to the warp. "Impressive," Selene said, her force staff incinerating a cultist who'd gotten too close. "But watch the blood. Nurgle's gifts are virulent. 1 drop in an open wound." "I know." Geralt cut her off. His healing factor was already working overtime, purging toxins that would have killed a normal human in seconds. But he felt it, the corruption trying to take root, whispering promises of rest, of ending the eternal struggle. He pushed it aside with the discipline of decades. 2 more plague-bearers emerged from the processing machinery, and behind them, something worse. A demon that towered over its lesser brethren, its belly distended and splitting open to reveal screaming faces trapped in its flesh. A plague-ridden, the texts had called it, a herald of Nurgle's garden. Varrak's entire squad concentrated fire. Hellgun beams and bolt rounds tore into the greater demon, but it kept coming, laughing with voices stolen from 10,000 plague victims. Its sword, a massive, corroded cleaver, swept out and caught a stormtrooper who'd moved too slowly. The armor split like parchment. The soldier's scream lasted 3 seconds before Nurgle's rot consumed him from inside out. "Fall back," Varrak ordered. "Acolytes, psychic bombardment, Witcher." But Geralt was already moving. He'd seen the pattern. The plague-ridden was slow to turn, its massive bulk a weakness. He sprinted, boots finding purchase on corroded machinery, using the vertical space the way he'd learned fighting griffins and wyverns. The demon noticed too late. Yrden. The signs sputtered, unstable in the warp-saturated air, but it held for 5 precious seconds. The plague-ridden's movement slowed, trapped in the purple circle of force. Geralt landed on its shoulders, drove his silver blade down through the back of its skull, and pushed, channeling every ounce of Witcher strength into the thrust. The demon's scream could have shattered glass. Its body convulsed, black blood erupting in fountains. Geralt held on, twisted the blade, felt the moment when the creature's connection to the Imperium severed. It collapsed, and he rode it down, rolling clear as the corpse began to dissolve. Silence. Nothing but the drip of toxic fluids and the wheeze of damaged respirators. Selene stared at him with something approaching awe. You just killed a plague-ridden. Alone. Without faith. She laughed, slightly hysterical. The Inquisitor was right. You're either very skilled or protected by something we don't understand. Geralt cleaned his blade on a piece of relatively clean fabric, noting the pitting in the silver. Daemon ichor was corrosive even to consecrated metal. I'm neither. I just know monsters. He surveyed the factory floor, counting bodies, 5 cultists still alive, whimpering in their corruption. What happens to them? Summary execution, Varrock said, already raising his bolt pistol. They embraced chaos. There's no redemption. Geralt watched the stormtrooper execute each cultist with mechanical efficiency. No trial, no questions, just bolts through skulls, and the Emperor's judgment rendered in cordite and blood. He'd killed monsters who wore human faces before. Werewolves, vampires, dopplers. But those had been creatures driven by nature or curse. These were people who'd chosen their damnation. Or had they? Had they really had a choice? Living in squalor and despair in a hive city of 8 billion souls, where hope was heresy and suffering was the only constant? Problem, Witcher? Selena's voice was soft, but her eyes were sharp. Just thinking, Geralt said carefully, about what drives people to worship decay. Weakness, Varrock stated. Moral failure. Chaos preys on the faithless. But Geralt had seen the worker habs, the endless factories, the mechanized horror of imperial life. He'd seen what this universe did to people, and he wondered how many cultists were truly faithful to chaos versus desperate for anything that promised an end to suffering. He didn't voice the thought, but Selene's eyes narrowed slightly, and he knew she'd read it in his expression. The vox crackled. Harkon's voice pleased. Excellent work. Purge complete, target eliminated, minimal casualties. Witcher, you've passed your examination. Return for debriefing and assignment to permanent retinue status. Geralt looked at the bodies, the corruption eating through the factory floor, the stormtroopers already preparing incendiary charges to sanitize the area. He thought about Harkon's offer, about hunting demons in a universe where the line between monster and victim was increasingly blurred. He'd accepted the contract. Now he'd see it through. But something gnawed at him. a witcher's instinct that whispered this was only the beginning, and the real monsters might not be the ones crawling from the warp. 3 weeks hunting with the Inquisition taught Geralt more about the Imperium than any text could convey. He learned that faith was measured in bodies burned, that purity was enforced with bolter and blade, and that mercy was considered the first step toward damnation. He'd killed 17 demons across 4 operations, lesser horrors mostly, but each one added to his understanding of how the warp manifested in real space. He also learned that Inquisitor Hakan was very good at his job, and that terrified him more than any demon. The Inquisitor sat across from Geralt in the Strategium, a bottle of Amasec between them. Actual alcohol, not the recaf swill that sustained most of the hive. Hakan poured 2 glasses with his human hand, the claw augmetic resting on a data slate covered in tactical assessments. "You're effective," Hakan said without preamble. "Kill rate above expectations. No signs of corruption despite repeated warp exposure. And Celine reports your psychic resistance remains anomalously high." He sipped his Amasec. "The Ordo Malleus could use more specialists like you. Consider this: formal induction, training, resources, authority to hunt demons across entire sectors." Geralt tasted the Amasec. Harsh, chemical, nothing like Nilfgaardian wine. And the cost? Absolute loyalty. To the Imperium, to the Emperor, to the Inquisition. Hakan's bionic eye clicked through scanning modes. "I've watched you, Witcher. You have reservations. You question. That's dangerous in a universe where doubt is a gateway to corruption." "I question whether killing desperate people makes them less desperate," Geralt said flatly. "Every cult we've purged, I see the same thing. Workers pushed past endurance, living in filth, promised something better by anything that whispers from the dark. You execute them and call it righteousness. Because it is righteous." Hakan's voice remained calm, reasonable. "Chaos doesn't care about their suffering. It uses their suffering. Every cultist we kill is one less vector for demonic manifestation. Every heretic purged is one less soul feeding the dark gods." He leaned forward. "You think I enjoy it? I've burned entire city blocks. I've ordered exterminatus on worlds where chaos took root. Billions dead by my command. But those billions saved trillions. That's the mathematics of survival in this universe." Geralt met his gaze. "And what happens when you run out of people to save?" "Then we've already lost." Hakan drained his glass. "But that day isn't today. Today, I have a mission that requires your particular skills. One that will test whether you can set aside your moral qualms for the greater good." The hololithic display flickered to life, showing a Hab district in Varangia's lower hive. Red markers clustered around a specific building, a shrine, according to the data stream. "The Shrine of St. Celestine's Tears," Hakan explained. 10,000 faithful congregate there daily. 3 days ago, several worshippers reported visions, the saint herself appearing to offer comfort and hope. His expression darkened. Yesterday, the visions intensified. Today, the entire congregation refuses to leave. They claim the saint has promised them ascension. Geralt's medallion resting on the table gave a faint vibration. Daemon. Probable Daemonet incursion. Slaanesh's servants are subtle. They wear beauty like a mask, promise pleasure and transcendence while delivering damnation. The entity is likely masquerading as the saint, corrupting faithful who are too desperate or naive to recognize the deception. Harkon's human eye fixed on Geralt. Standard protocol is clear. Evacuate if possible, but if the corruption is too deep, we sanitize. Prometheum purge. Total population loss. 10,000 people. 10,000 potential demon hosts. One crack in their faith, one moment of despair, and Slaanesh has an army of cultists in the heart of a loyalist district. Harkon's tone remained clinical. But I'm willing to try an alternative approach. You go in alone. Your psychic resistance makes you immune to demonic persuasion. You identify and eliminate the demon. If the faithful are salvageable, we extract them. If not, he let the implication hang. Geralt's jaw tightened. And if I refuse to kill innocents, who might be saved? Then I send in Varrock with flamers, and you watch 10,000 souls burn, knowing you could have prevented it. Harkon poured another glass. This is what service to the Imperium means, Witcher. Hard choices, impossible mathematics. You wanted to hunt demons? Here's your contract. But this time, the monster wears the face of hope. The shrine of Saint Celestine's tears was beautiful in the way only Imperial architecture could be. Gothic spires rising from hab-block foundations, stained glass depicting the living saint's deeds, and everywhere the smell of incense and unwashed bodies pressed together in desperate faith. Geralt approached alone, silver sword concealed beneath a pilgrim's robe Harkon had provided. The faithful parted around him like water, their eyes glazed with rapture. They sang hymns in high Gothic, voices raised in perfect harmony. But Geralt's Witcher senses catalogued the wrongness. Pupils dilated beyond natural limits, skin flushed with unnatural warmth, and beneath the incense, the faint sweetness of corruption. At the shrine's heart, elevated on a dais of white marble, stood the vision. She was perfect, too perfect. Blonde hair cascading like liquid gold, armor that seemed to glow with inner light, wings of pure white spreading behind her like divine judgment made manifest. The face was serene, compassionate, everything a saint should be. But Geralt's medallion vibrated violently, and his Witcher eyes saw the cracks in the illusion. The wing's feathers moved wrong, twitching like insect antennae. The armor's glow pulsed in rhythm with something beneath the surface. And the eyes, those beautiful, merciful eyes, held depths of hunger that had nothing to do with divinity. Welcome, lost one. The voice was music, each word a caress. You've traveled so far, suffered so much. Come, let me ease your burdens. The faithful pressed closer, reaching for Geralt with beseeching hands. She's shown us paradise, one whispered. Beyond the suffering, beyond the endless work. She'll take us there, all of us, if we just surrender. Geralt's hand found his sword hilt. Surrender to what? The saint, The thing wearing a saint's face tilted its head. To joy, to pleasure, to the freedom from this cruel universe's grinding despair. The illusion flickered just for an instant, and Geralt saw what lurked beneath. Something with too many limbs, flesh that shifted between genders and species, claws filed to blade sharpness and decorated with stolen jewelry. A demonette of Slaanesh, exactly as the texts described. "These people came to you for hope," Geralt said quietly, "and you're feeding them poison wrapped in prayer. I'm giving them what the Imperium never could, the promise of something better." The demonette's voice remained beautiful, but edges of cruelty crept in. "Look at them, worked to death in factories, crushed beneath the weight of an empire that sees them as expendable. I offer transcendence. I offer meaning to their suffering. You offer damnation. Only to those who lack the strength to embrace transformation." The demonette gestured, and the faithful moved, not attacking, but surrounding Geralt in concentric rings. "You're different, Witcher. Yes, I know what you are. Your soul tastes of other worlds, of possibility unexplored. Join us. Help these people find peace. Or..." The mask of beauty fell away entirely, revealing the horror beneath. "Become another corpse crushed by the Imperium's righteousness." Geralt's sword cleared its sheath in one fluid motion. The faithful gasped, not in horror, but in confusion, as if waking from dreams. The demonette shrieked, the sound shattering stained glass, and lunged with supernatural speed. Geralt was faster. He'd fought succubi before, creatures that relied on seduction and misdirection. The principle was the same. Don't let them control the engagement. His silver blade met the demonette's claws, and the creature recoiled from the burning contact. But it was strong, far stronger than the plague-bearers, and its movements were liquid grace turned predatory. It struck high, Geralt ducked low. It feinted left. He read the intent in its shoulder tension and moved right. They danced across the shrine floor while the faithful watched in growing horror. The illusion of the saint finally shattered completely. "You can't save them." The demonette's voice shifted, becoming a choir of stolen voices. Men, women, children, all promising different form of pleasure and pain. "Even if you kill me, the Inquisition will burn them for witnessing my true form. They're tainted now, all of them." Geralt knew it was right. He'd seen Harkon's methods. Exposure to demonic truth was grounds for execution, full stop. These people, factory workers who'd committed no crime except seeking comfort in their designated shrine, would be purged alongside the demon. 10,000 souls. Quen. The shield sign flared to life as the demonette's claw found an opening. The psychic barrier held, barely, and Geralt used the momentary protection to create distance. His mind raced through options, each worse than the last. Kill the demon, the faithful die anyway, purged as potential corruption vectors. Let the demon escape. Slaanesh gains a foothold, more souls fall, and Geralt proves himself unreliable to the only authority offering him purpose in this universe. There was no good choice, only degrees of damnation. The Daemonette sensed his hesitation and pressed the attack, moving through the faithful crowd with deliberate cruelty. Geralt couldn't strike without hitting innocents. The creature knew it, laughed with a dozen stolen voices, used them as living shields. Choose, Witcher, your precious neutrality or their lives, the Imperium's judgment or Chaos's mercy. There is no middle ground in this universe, only extremes. Geralt's Witcher training had taught him to evaluate contracts, to weigh risks against rewards. But this wasn't a contract anymore. This was a test of his principles, his adaptability, his willingness to become what this universe demanded. He made his choice. Ard. The telekinetic sign erupted with more force than he'd managed since arriving in the 41st Millennium, fueled by desperate focus. The crowd scattered like leaves in a hurricane, clearing the space between Geralt and his target. The Daemonette shrieked as the force wave struck, slamming it against the shrine's altar hard enough to crack marble. Geralt closed the distance before it could recover. His silver blade found its throat, then its chest, then the space where its stolen heart would be. Each strike burned with the purity of uncorrupted metal, meeting warp-spawn flesh. The Daemonette thrashed, beauty and horror bleeding together as it dissolved back into the Imperium. Its final words were a curse and a promise. They'll still burn, Witcher. You've changed nothing. Silence fell across the shrine. The faithful huddled together, faces pale with shock and dawning comprehension. They'd seen the truth. They'd been exposed to chaos in its unveiled form. By imperial law, they were contaminated. Geralt's vox crackled, Harkon's voice cold and efficient. Status? Demon eliminated. Geralt looked at the terrified faces surrounding him. Workers, families, children no older than 10. The faithful are unharmed. Unharmed but tainted. You know the protocol. They didn't choose corruption. They came here for hope, and a demon exploited that. Geralt's grip tightened on his sword. They're innocent. Innocence is irrelevant. Exposure is contamination. I'm dispatching Varric's purge teams now. Clear the area, Witcher. This doesn't concern you anymore. Geralt stood among the faithful, silver sword dripping demonic ichor, and felt the weight of impossible choice. He could walk away, complete his contract, accept the Imperium's mathematics. Let 10,000 people burn because protocol demanded it. He'd survive. He'd continue hunting demons, learning this universe's rules, adapting like a good witcher should. Or he could refuse. Stand between the Inquisition and the innocent. Fight for people who'd done nothing except seek comfort in a universe designed to crush them. Both choices led to damnation, but one let him sleep at night. Harkon, Geralt said slowly, I'm not clearing the area. A pause, then quietly dangerous, explain. These people need examination, not execution. Quarantine them, test them. If they show signs of corruption, then act. But wholesale slaughter isn't justice. It's just easier than doing the work. You're refusing a direct order. I'm telling you, there's another way. Use it, or burn me with them." Geralt raised his voice so the faithful could hear. "Anyone who wants to live, follow me, now. The Inquisition is coming, and they're not here to save you." The crowd moved with the desperate efficiency of people who'd spent lives avoiding industrial accidents and enforcer sweeps. They poured toward the shrine's exits, and Geralt moved with them, knowing Hakan would send forces, knowing this rebellion would cost him everything he'd built with the Inquisition. But he'd been a witcher for over a century. He'd broken contracts before when the terms violated his principles. This was no different, except it was, because this time there was nowhere to run. The faithful scattered into Varangia's lower hive, and Geralt stood alone in the emptied shrine, waiting for judgment. His vox was silent. His medallion had finally stopped vibrating. When Varric arrived with his purge team, he found only the Witcher and the demon's ash. "Inquisitor Hakan wants you in chains," the sergeant said, bolt pistol raised. "You defied orders. You let potential corruption vectors escape. Give me one reason not to execute you here." Geralt met his eye lenses steadily. "Because I did what a witcher does. I killed the monster without becoming one. If that's heresy in your Imperium, then your Imperium has bigger problems than chaos." Varric's weapon didn't waver, but neither did he fire. "Walk," he finally said. "The Inquisitor will decide your fate." Geralt walked, silver sword still in hand, knowing he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He'd challenged imperial authority. He'd chosen mercy over protocol. In the 41st millennium, that might be the gravest heresy of all. The interrogation cell was small, featureless, and designed to break spirits. Geralt had been in worse. Tortured by the Nilfgaardians once. Interrogated by Dijkstra more times than he could count. He sat in silence, hands unbound but watched by gun servitors tracking his every breath, and waited for Hakan's judgment. When the Inquisitor finally arrived, he carried no weapons. That somehow made him more dangerous. 10,000 potential corruption vectors disappeared into the Underhive, Hakan said, settling into the chair across from Geralt. "My Auspex teams lost them within hours. Impressive, really. You gave them enough head start that finding them all would require resources I can't spare." His bionic eye fixed on Geralt. "Was it worth it? They were innocent. Innocence doesn't survive exposure to unveiled chaos. You know this. I've shown you the texts, the case studies, the probability matrices. 93% of those exposed to demonic truth either succumb to corruption within a year or require lifelong monitoring." Hakan's human eye held something like disappointment. "You chose sentiment over statistics. That's not how we survive in this universe." Geralt leaned forward. "Your statistics don't account for choice. Those people didn't worship the demon. They worshipped what they thought was a saint. When they saw the truth, they recoiled. That's not corruption. That's faith tested and holding. For now. But chaos is patient. It plants seeds, waits for doubt to take root." Hakan stood, pacing the cell's perimeter. "You've put me in an impossible position, Witcher. By every imperial law, you should face execution for defying inquisitorial authority. But, he paused, you also eliminated a Slaaneshi infiltrator that had eluded detection for weeks. Your methods are effective, even if your morality is dangerously flexible. So what happens now? Now, you learn what the Imperium does with useful assets who can't be trusted. Hakan gestured, and the cell door opened. Varrock entered, carrying equipment that made Geralt's jaw tighten. Neural implants, tracking devices, servitor-grade control mechanisms. You become a sanctioned specialist, bound by technology instead of loyalty. You hunt demons under my direct supervision, with a kill switch implanted in your brainstem. One sign of corruption, one moment of defiance, and I end you remotely. Geralt looked at the neural implants, then back at Hakan. And if I refuse? Then I execute you as a rogue psyker and potential chaos sympathizer. Your body is studied, your unique augmentations are catalogued, and perhaps we learn something useful for future demon hunters. Hakan's expression was almost regretful. You wanted to work your way, Witcher. But there is no your way in the Imperium. There's only service or death. The Witcher mutations in Geralt's blood sang with warnings. Neural implants would interface with his enhanced nervous system in unpredictable ways. The kill switch might not work cleanly, might leave him paralyzed or brain dead instead of simply dead. And even if it functioned as designed, he'd be a slave wearing a hunter's face. He'd spent his life avoiding exactly this kind of control. Witchers were free agents, bound by contracts but never owned. The thought of Hakan's finger on a metaphorical trigger made something primal in him recoil. But the alternative was death, and dead witches saved no one. There's a third option, Geralt said quietly. Is there? Hakan's tone suggested he already knew where this was going. I leave. Disappear into the underhive like those faithful. Hunt demons on my own terms, without your authority and without your leash. Geralt met the Inquisitor's gaze steadily. You lose an asset, but you also lose a problem. Clean break. Hakan actually laughed, a bitter, tired sound. You think you can survive out there? Without inquisitorial resources? Without intelligence on demon manifestations? Without backup when you face something beyond your capabilities? He leaned close. The underhive will kill you in a month. If the gangs don't, the Arbites will. And if, by some miracle, you survive, the first major demon you face alone will tear you apart. Maybe, but it'll be on my terms. Your terms. Hakan straightened, his mechanical hand flexing. You know what I see when I look at you, Witcher? Wasted potential. You could be one of the Imperium's greatest demon hunters. Instead, you cling to principles that have no place in this universe. Neutrality is a lie. Mercy is weakness. The only thing that matters is survival. Humanity's survival, and everything else is negotiable. Not to me. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the gun servitors and the distant thrumming of the hive's endless machinery. Finally, Hakan nodded slowly. Varrock, stand down. Release him. The sergeant's surprise was evident even through his helmet. Inquisitor, I said release him. Hakan's voice carried absolute authority. The Witcher has made his choice. We'll respect it. Geralt stood warily, expecting a trap. Just like that. Just like that. Hakan gestured to the door. You're free to go. No implants, no execution, no pursuit. Walk out of here and disappear into Varangia's depths. Hunt your demons. Save your innocence. Cling to your precious principles. The Inquisitor's expression was unreadable. Consider it an investment. Either you'll prove me wrong and survive through sheer skill, or you'll prove me right and die screaming in some forgotten underhive tunnel. Either outcome provides useful data. Geralt moved toward the door, every instinct screaming that this was wrong, that Inquisitors didn't simply let assets walk away. But Hakan made no move to stop him, and Varrac's stormtroopers parted to let him pass. At the threshold, Geralt paused. Why? Because I'm curious, Hakan admitted. You're an anomaly, Witcher. You've survived things that should have killed you, resisted corruption that should have claimed you, and clung to morality in a universe designed to crush it. I want to see how long that lasts. And when you finally break, when reality strips away your neutrality and forces you to choose between your principles and survival, I want to be there to witness it. Geralt said nothing. He walked through the fortress monastery's corridors, past stormtroopers and acolytes who watched with confused suspicion, until he emerged into Varangia's polluted night. The underhive waited below, vast and hungry. He'd made his choice. Now he'd live with it, or die by it. The hunt continued, but this time on his terms alone. 3 months in the underhive taught Geralt what freedom truly cost in the 41st millennium. He'd found shelter in the abandoned sublevels where even the sump crows feared to venture. Chambers that predated the current hive structure by millennia, where ancient machinery hummed with purposes long forgotten. His silver sword stayed sharp through constant use. His signs grew stronger as he learned to filter the warp's interference rather than fight it. And his reputation grew among the desperate souls who lived below the Imperium's gaze. They called him the Silver Hunter, the White Wolf, the demon slayer who asked no questions and demanded no faith. Kyle found him in what passed for his workshop, a converted maintenance bay where he'd established something resembling the alchemy labs of Kaer Morhen. Tubes of scavenged chemicals bubbled over makeshift burners. Demon blood samples were preserved in stolen medical containers. Notes covered the walls in a mixture of elder speech and low Gothic, documenting weaknesses and patterns. "You've got a problem," she said without preamble, her mechanical arm carrying a data slate. "Big one. The Gilded Saints gang hit a Medici facility in the Rust District, took hostages, over 200. They're demanding the Imperium recognize their independence, give them territory and supplies." She paused. "There's a demon with them. Bloodletter of Khorne, according to the Vox chatter. The Arbites are planning to storm the facility in 6 hours and kill everyone inside." Geralt cleaned Daemon Ichor from his sword, the blade showing wear from months of constant fighting. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because 30 of those hostages are from the shrine, the ones you saved." Kyle's expression was grim. "They've been living quiet, trying to survive. Now they're caught in someone else's war. The Arbiters won't distinguish between hostage and heretic. They'll burn the whole building. Geralt was already moving, gathering equipment. Silver sword, steel sword, the modified grenades he'd learned to craft from Underhive materials. 3 months of hunting alone had taught him efficiency. No backup meant no mistakes. "This is suicide," Kael said, but she was checking her own weapons. "The Saints are 40 strong, armed with actual military hardware. The demon will tear you apart. And even if you win, the Arbites will still purge everyone inside. Then I'll have to work fast." The Medici facility was a fortress of corroded metal and desperation. Geralt approached from below, using maintenance tunnels that bypassed the Saints' perimeter guards. His Witcher senses tracked heartbeats, breathing patterns, the distinct psychic stench of cornate corruption. The demon was on the upper level. He could feel its rage bleeding through the building's structure like heat through stone. He emerged inside, moving through shadows with the silence of decades of practice. 2 Saints' guards died without raising an alarm, steel blade through throats, bodies lowered quietly. The hostages were clustered in what had been a surgery bay, watched by nervous gangers who looked more terrified than their prisoners. Geralt recognized faces from the shrine. A woman who'd thanked him with tears in her eyes. A man who'd carried his daughter to safety. Children who shouldn't have survived even 1 day in the Underhive, let alone 3 months. They saw him. Recognition flared in their eyes, but discipline held. They stayed silent, understanding that survival meant patience. The demon waited above, and Geralt climbed toward it with the inevitability of storm clouds gathering. The bloodletter was everything the texts promised: corded muscle and brass armor, a hellblade that wept flame, and eyes that held nothing but the pure joy of slaughter. It stood among the Gilded Saints' leadership like a king among peasants, radiating violence so intense that the air shimmered. "Finally," it rumbled, voice like grinding stone, "I smelled you climbing, smelled your silver, your mutations, your stubborn defiance." The demon's grin was lipless, showing teeth filed to points. "Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows. Yours will do nicely." The gang leaders scattered as the bloodletter charged. Geralt met it with Quen already flaring. The shield sign had grown stronger through necessity, and it caught the Hellblade's first strike with a shriek of contested energies. The impact drove Geralt back 3 steps, boots tearing grooves in the ferrocrete. This wasn't like the Plague Bearers or the Daemonette. This was pure predatory excellence, a creature born from humanity's collective rage and perfected through 10,000 years of slaughter. It was fast, stronger than anything Geralt had fought except perhaps higher vampires, and it felt no pain, no fear, no hesitation. Geralt fought anyway. He used everything: Witcher speed to stay ahead of the Hellblade, Ard to create distance when pressed, Igni to drive the demon towards structural weaknesses. The facility's upper level became a war zone of clashing metal and psychic fury. Every exchange cost him. His armor cracked, his shield sign faltered, and the demon's blade opened a cut across his ribs that burned with unnatural heat. But 3 months of hunting alone had taught Geralt something crucial. Demons were bound by patterns. Khorne's servants attacked with berserker rage, prioritizing aggression over defense. The Bloodletter's every move was a killing strike, which meant it left itself open. Geralt saw the pattern, waited for it. When the demon committed to a devastating overhead cleave, he didn't dodge. He rolled forward, inside its guard where the Hellblade couldn't reach. His silver sword found the gap between brass chestplate and gorget, drove up through what passed for the creature's throat, and Geralt pushed, channeling every ounce of Witcher strength and 3 months of accumulated rage into the thrust. The Bloodletter's scream of fury became a death rattle. It thrashed, nearly taking Geralt's head off with a backhand strike, but the silver was already burning through its essence. The demon collapsed, brass armor clattering, and dissolved into ash and the psychic stench of Khorne's displeasure. Geralt staggered, bleeding from a dozen wounds, and looked down at the gang leaders cowering below. "Free the hostages, all of them, now!" They did, scrambling over each other in their haste. The Shrine faithful poured out of the Medici facility as Geralt heard Arbite's sirens approaching. 3 minutes, maybe 4, before they arrived with flamers and righteous fury. "Go," he told the fleeing crowd. "Disappear. Stay scattered. Survive." They went, melting into the Underhive's endless warrens. Geralt remained, sword in hand, as the Arbite stormed the building. They found him standing over demon ash and gang corpses, and for a moment, just one moment, he thought they might execute him on principle. Instead, the Arbite's sergeant surveyed the scene, then nodded once. "Whoever you are, you saved the Imperium the trouble. Move along. We'll handle the cleanup." Geralt moved along. 6 months after falling through reality's cracks, Geralt of Rivia had carved a place for himself in the 41st millennium, not through faith or authority, but through the oldest principle he knew: hunt the monsters, protect the innocent, survive another day. The Underhive knew him now. Whispers traveled through the darkness about the White Wolf who killed Daemons with silver and asked nothing in return. Cult cells vanished before they could grow. Lesser demon manifestations were banished before the Inquisition even detected them. And somewhere in the depths, protected by a witch's vigilance, the faithful from Saint Celestine's shrine built new lives free from both chaos and the Imperium's crushing certainty. Geralt's workshop had evolved. Walls covered in demon taxonomies that would make Inquisitors jealous. Alchemical compounds adapted to 41st millennium ingredients, and a network of informants who traded demon sightings for protection. He'd learned to read the warp's patterns like he once read monster tracks. His signs had strengthened through constant use and adaptation, and his silver blade, though pitted and scarred, remained sharp enough to send demons screaming back to the Imperium. He knew Harkon was watching. Intelligence suggested the Inquisitor tracked his demon kills, catalogued his methods, waited for the moment when the Witcher's principles would finally shatter against impossible choices. Perhaps that moment would come. Perhaps this universe would eventually demand he becomes something he couldn't accept. But not today. Today, his medallion hummed with fresh warnings. Today, somewhere in Varangia's endless darkness, a demon was manifesting, and people would die without intervention. Today, there were monsters to hunt. Geralt checked his swords, gathered his equipment, and stepped into the Underhive's toxic shadows. He was alone. No inquisitorial backup, no imperial authority, no certainty of survival. Just a witcher in an impossible universe, clinging to principles that shouldn't work, but somehow did. In the 41st millennium, there was only war. But war took many forms, and Geralt of Rivia had chosen his battlefield. The hunt continued. It always did. And in the darkness between faith and damnation, the Silver Hunter walked his own path, neither witch nor saint, neither heretic nor hero. Simply a professional doing what he'd always done, killing monsters so others might live another day. The Emperor protects. More stories await.